Welcome to Immigration Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: China's cashless society shift is keeping foreign tourists from opening wallets. A massive fire left 7,000 people, including thousands of children, homeless. Australia didn't seem to notice. France scraps birthright citizenship in Mayotte in migration clampdown. Trump versus Biden on immigration, 12 charts comparing U.S. border security. Perth is home to many communities of migrants. So, where have they settled? China's cashless society shift is keeping foreign tourists from opening wallets. South China Morning Post. The lack of payment options for foreign tourists in China is deterring visitors from traveling to the country, hindering Beijing's efforts to boost foreign relations and economic recovery. China's dominant mobile payment providers, WeChat Pay and Alipay, have recently allowed overseas tourists to link their international credit or debit cards to their platforms, but there are still limitations and service fees associated with foreign cards. Furthermore, many tourists are reluctant to use mobile payments due to privacy concerns, and the decline in ATMs across the country has made it difficult for visitors to withdraw cash. A massive fire left 7,000 people, including thousands of children, homeless. Australia didn't seem to notice. ABC. A fire broke out in a Rohingya refugee camp in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, destroying hundreds of homes and leaving thousands of people homeless. The fire received little media coverage, highlighting the lack of attention given to the Rohingya crisis. The dire conditions in the camps, including overcrowding, lack of firefighting resources, and the use of flammable materials for shelters, make them vulnerable to fires. The January blaze is the latest in a series of major fires in the camps, some of which are suspected to be acts of arson. The deteriorating conditions in the camps have led to an increase in the number of Rohingya refugees attempting dangerous sea journeys to neighboring countries. However, countries in the region are becoming more hostile towards Rohingya refugees, exacerbating their plight. The Rohingya crisis should still matter to Australia because of its scale and the responsibility to address the humanitarian crisis in its own region. The Australian government could do more to support Rohingya refugees, including increasing resettlement and taking a greater leadership role in the region. France scraps birthright citizenship in Mayotte in migration clampdown. Telegraph. France's Interior Minister, Gerald Darmanin, has announced that the country will revoke birthright citizenship in the Department of Mayotte in an attempt to tackle a migration crisis. Mayotte, located in the Indian Ocean, is the poorest region in France and has experienced social unrest, poverty, and crime. The region has also seen an influx of illegal immigrants from the Comoros Islands. The new measure means that individuals born in Mayotte will no longer be able to obtain French citizenship unless they have French parents. Trump versus Biden on immigration, 12 charts comparing U.S. border security. Washington Post. Illegal border crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border have reached the highest levels in history under President Joe Biden, averaging 2 million per year. The surge began shortly after Biden took office and rolled back many of Donald Trump's immigration policies. The number of people taken into custody by the U.S. Border Patrol has consistently been at record highs under Biden's administration. The increase in illegal crossings has been driven by a rise in unaccompanied minors, families, and single adults, with migrants coming from a wider variety of countries than ever before. Migrants from countries such as Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Senegal, Mauritania, China, and India are crossing the border in greater numbers. The challenge of processing, detaining, and potentially deporting migrants from such a diverse range of countries has strained the Biden administration, leading to the release of migrants into the United States when facilities are overcrowded. Deportations and returns have also increased under Biden, partly due to the greater volume of illegal crossings. However, the number of deportations remains below the level of illegal crossings, resulting in a growing gap between the number of people taken into custody and those who are sent back or deported. The backlog in the U.S. immigration court system has also continued to grow, with many migrants facing court hearings scheduled years in advance. Perth is home to many communities of migrants. So, where have they settled? The Sydney Morning Herald. Perth, Australia is seeing an increase in migrants from South Africa, India, and the Philippines. While the British have historically dominated the migrant population in Western Australia, recent years have seen a rise in migrants from these countries. The increase in migration is influenced by economic factors such as the expansion of the mining sector, as well as push-out factors such as lack of employment or civil conflict in other parts of the world. Perth's suburbs are now home to pockets of newer migrant populations, such as Indian populations in the southeast and Chinese populations in the northeast. Chinese banks refrained from dealing with Russia over sanctions fears. South China Morning Post. China and Russia are in close dialogue over international payments processing after a Chinese bank reportedly stopped transactions with Russia due to fears of being sanctioned. The Russian Deputy Foreign Minister, Andrei Rudenko, said that problems with payments between China and Russia would be solved, adding that a number of Chinese banks had refrained from banking activities with Russia due to fears of sanctions. The Chinese yuan has become an economic lifeline for Russia since it was expelled from the SWIFT financial messaging system in February 2022 following its invasion of Ukraine. More than 100 migrants crossed channel in 3 small boats. Telegraph. A total of 124 migrants crossed the English Channel on Saturday, bringing the total number of crossings so far this year to 1,506. This is lower than the 2,072 by the same point in 2023, but higher than the 1,339 in 2022. The highest number of migrants to cross in a single day in 2024 was 358 on January 17. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has made stopping the boats a key pledge and his Safety of Rwanda bill, which aims to remove migrants to Rwanda rather than allowing them to seek asylum in the UK, has passed the Commons and is now being examined in the House of Lords. In Canada's housing crisis, skilled tradespeople as essential as blueprints. Here's how Ottawa can grow their numbers. The Toronto Star. Canada's housing affordability crisis is being exacerbated by a lack of skilled tradespeople needed to build new homes, according to an op-ed in the Toronto Star. The piece suggests that attracting young people to apprenticeship training and supporting their success requires a major rethink in government policy. It recommends that the government support enrollment in pre-apprenticeship and diploma programs, extend postgraduate work permits for international students, and offset the cost of equipment by encouraging industry investment and providing tax breaks. Man flies from Heathrow to New York without ticket or passport. Telegraph. An investigation has been launched into security procedures at Heathrow Airport after a man boarded a British Airways flight to New York without a ticket or passport. Craig Sturt, 46, apparently followed another passenger through passport checks at Terminal 5. He was detained by security officials on arrival at JFK Airport and returned to the UK. Sturt was subsequently charged with fraud and offences under the Aviation Security Act. A warrant for his arrest was issued after he failed to appear in court. Sturt remains at large. Canada's rural communities will continue long decline unless something's done, says researcher. CBC. Rural communities in Canada will continue to decline in population unless governments intervene with policy changes to address the preference of new immigrants to settle in major urban centres rather than smaller towns, villages and hamlets, according to Lindsay Finally, a PhD candidate in sociology at Western University. Without new immigrants, rural communities will become older than urban areas and face big problems in the future. Finally suggests that governments focus on improving transport links, supports for immigrant families and increasing amenities that enhance cultural life to encourage settlement in rural areas. Drugs, guns, corruption, Australia paid suspect companies to run offshore detention. The Sydney Morning Herald. The Australian government's Home Affairs Department has awarded contracts to companies linked to arms and drug smuggling, bribery and corruption, and sanctions violations on Iran, despite a failure to vet the businesses. The inquiry by former ASIO Director General and Defence Chief Dennis Richardson also criticised senior public servants for not using available intelligence that could have prevented taxpayers from paying companies with alleged links to serious crimes. Richardson said the failure to conduct due diligence was simply a breakdown and resulted in contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars being awarded to allegedly crooked firms. International students are in crisis. Governments need to take responsibility, Peel Charities. CBC. The Canadian branch of international charity CALSA-Aid has called on the government and post-secondary institutions to do more to support international students in need. The charity says it receives 5 calls a day from such students in Brampton alone, with a total of 8,200 students nationwide struggling to access food, clothes, and shelter. Around 500,000 international students live in the Greater Toronto Area, putting a strain on charities. CALSA-Aid argues that post-secondary institutions are benefiting from the presence of international students, who pay 4 times more tuition than domestic students, but are not providing adequate support. International students are also affected by federal limitations on how much income they can earn, which reduces their job opportunities. The president of the College Students Association says that the situation is exacerbated by underfunding of post-secondary education in Ontario. The Ontario Ministry of Colleges and Universities recently announced that it is looking into requiring all colleges and universities to have guaranteed housing options for incoming international students. Deep failings revealed in the operation of Australia's gatekeepers. The Sydney Morning Herald. Senior Australian public servants failed to conduct proper background checks on companies contracted to run the country's asylum seeker offshore program, according to former ASIO Director General and Defence Chief Dennis Richardson. This failure allowed firms suspected of arms and drug smuggling, bribery, and corruption to become involved in the program. The revelation puts Australia's position as a trusted influence in the Pacific region at risk and has raised questions about the government's oversight of taxpayer funds. Barnaby Joyce's bizarre renewable energy proposal. The Sydney Morning Herald. Australian farmers are concerned that the ruling Liberal National Party coalition is attempting to move renewable energy projects from rural areas to cities. Farmers currently benefit from lease and rent payments for hosting wind and solar farms, with additional income helping to supplement agricultural revenues. The coalition has been accused of championing the interests of large investors by attempting to move renewable projects to urban areas where existing infrastructure can be used. The claims have been made by members of the public in letters to the Sydney Morning Herald. Farmers have traditionally been strong supporters of renewable energy projects in Australia, as they benefit from the additional revenue stream provided by lease and rent payments. However, the Liberal National Party coalition has recently suggested moving renewable projects to urban areas using existing infrastructure. The move has been criticized as being in the interests of large investors. It is not clear if the government is considering the proposal. Immigration, not the economy, is key to Tory election success. Telegraph. The UK may have entered a recession at the end of 2023, according to the National Institute for Economic and Social Research, NISR. The country's GDP is estimated to have fallen by 0.1% in the final quarter of last year, marking 2 consecutive quarters of contraction, which defines a recession. Official GDP figures will be released on Thursday, which coincides with 2 by-elections. The Conservative Party is already expected to lose both, so confirmation of a recession could raise further questions about Rishi Sunak's leadership. And that's a wrap for today's news. We covered a wide range of topics, from China's cashless society and the difficulties faced by foreign tourists, to immigration challenges in the US and UK, and the housing crisis in Canada. We also delved into issues of security and corruption in Australia, as well as the decline of rural communities in Canada. It's clear that these issues have far-reaching implications and require thoughtful consideration. China's cashless society, while convenient for many, poses challenges for foreign tourists who may not have access to the necessary payment options. This not only affects individual travelers but also hinders Beijing's efforts to boost foreign relations and economic recovery. The Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh continues to be overlooked, with a recent fire in a refugee camp receiving little media coverage. The dire conditions in these camps make them vulnerable to fires and other tragedies, and it's crucial that international attention and support are given to address this ongoing humanitarian crisis. The immigration policies of President Joe Biden have led to a surge in illegal border crossings at the US-Mexico border, with record highs in the number of people taken into custody. The diverse range of countries from which migrants are coming adds complexity to the processing and detention of individuals. It's clear that the Biden administration is facing significant challenges in managing this situation and balancing the need for border security with compassionate immigration policies. In Australia, concerns have been raised about the government's contracts with companies involved in the offshore detention of asylum seekers. The failure to conduct proper background checks and the potential involvement of these companies in serious crimes raises questions about the government's oversight and use of taxpayer funds. On a more positive note, we've also seen how migration patterns are shifting in Perth, Australia, with an increase in migrants from South Africa, India, and the Philippines. Economic factors and push-out factors from other parts of the world are driving this change, and it's interesting to see how different communities are settling in different areas of the city. Lastly, we touched on the importance of skilled tradespeople in Canada's housing crisis and the need for government policies to attract and support young people in these fields. The decline of rural communities in Canada also highlights the need for policy changes to encourage settlement in these areas and prevent further population decline. Phew, that was quite a roundup. Now I'd love to hear from you, our viewers. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you have any questions or opinions on the topics we covered today? Don't be shy, join the conversation and let's hear what you have to say. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.